Okay, I wanted to do continue on number four here while it's kind of fresh in my mind, and I realized that I have kind of like a crown of like a palm tree from where I'm sitting here, which is kind of funny and maybe going to distract me a little bit, but maybe not. I'm going to try to convey some knowledge right now on number four. Um, is the power of knowledge determined by the way in which it's conveyed? And in the last video, I kind of dug into math and how math is sort of intrinsically valuable, whether or not whether or not it's conveyed well or not. And so I wanted to get into this idea of maybe the difference between like intrinsic value versus extrinsic value, right? Like if math is sort of intrinsically powerful, not value, power, right? Math is powerful if we look at the way that it underlies at least in terms of knowledge, the way that it underlies the workings of the universe, like the fact that it describes what makes stars shine is just mind blowing and beautiful. And so I left off the last video and saying that, like, math is powerful whether it's conveyed well or not. And couldn't it be, but could it be more powerful if it was conveyed even better? Right? Like this idea that other countries and Gemini brought up South Korea and Singapore as being sort of high performing in terms of math. The and so I was wondering if if is that due to the fact that the way that it's taught, or is it actually due to um, something sort of something else that is maybe just I don't know, like a natural talent that people have, which is of course like a stereotype, right? Like that that all Asians are good at math is like this stereotype that we hear about. So I don't know. Um, I'm not quite sure, and I want to look a little bit more into that. But I was thinking more about this idea of extrinsic versus intrinsic value. And let's say that we could figure out how to convey the knowledge of math in a better way, and that could somehow, unlock more secrets of the universe or something like that. If if Albert Einstein being able to figure out E equals mc squared got us to this sort of amazing amount of power that we have now, then could we get even more powerful by further emphasizing improved conveyance of knowledge? And so if that were the case, then we would almost say there's an extrinsic power to the knowledge that maybe can be that maybe isn't sort of fixed, right? So if there's an intrinsic power to math that is almost like fixed, like whether or not you convey it well or not, it's just there, right? But the extrinsic power of mathematical knowledge could be could be influenced by the way in which it's conveyed, right? I think that's maybe a way to think about this. The extrinsic knowledge. So intrinsic power versus extrinsic power. And the intrinsic power is the power that is just contained within the thing itself. The extrinsic power is the power that it can be used, that it can have on other things in the universe. And so if we applied this intrinsic extrinsic idea, let's start with the human sciences. Are there certain ideas that are intrinsically valuable or intrinsically powerful? Like, let's say, freedom, right? Freedom is something that seems to be sort of intrinsically powerful. How you doing? So if it's intrinsically powerful because everybody wants it, we want to be free, right? We instinctively resist being restrained because it's uncomfortable, right? We're independent agents, and we know that that like to survive, we need to be able to operate sort of freely. Um, so I wonder if the concept of freedom is intrinsically powerful, and yet, um, it's extrinsic value, sort of like the way that it has manifested in our world over time has definitely not been just a natural thing, right? Like, most people throughout history have not been sort of technically free. They've had to operate within the constraints of their society. Um, Especially, I mean, even if we go back to maybe tribal beginnings, right? Where we were maybe living in clans or tribes of small groups. Um, this was really necessary for our survival, right? Because we were social creatures who physically are not very powerful compared to other animals. Um, but our social capabilities far exceed that of other animals, and so we sort of needed to be within these type of units. And in that time, you had to live by the structure of the society or of the tribe, and it was typically either mostly patriarchal, where there was a strong male at the head of sort of the tribe, and then but obviously there were also many examples of matriarchal societies where the women were in control. Um, I don't know. I look at like lions, and like lions are, the males are, don't really do much except for fight other males, and protect the pride of lions, right? Um, and I guess they get food sometimes, but I think like lionesses tend to be the main ones going on the hunt. When it comes to humans, it's somewhat similar, right? Like the males sort of had the main job of um, probably hunting, but also protecting the tribe. So I wonder if um, uh, we can see something there in sort of the start of freedom, right? Like you wouldn't want freedom from the tribe, or from the clan, uh, unless unless it's in very specific circumstances. Like there's certain like rites of passage with different um, we've heard of with different tribes and different societies where the a person, when they're becoming a man or a woman in some cases, but we usually hear about this with like boys becoming men and having a rites of passage. Then they would, maybe that would be some freedom because they would leave the clan or the tribe for a time being and then maybe come back. But for the most part, they operated within the tribe, and so freedom wasn't really intrinsic. Right? It was almost it was almost you wouldn't want to be free, because if you were, then that would mean like you would be outside of the sort of protection of the tribe. But then as we advanced and got into larger communities, whether it was with uh, you know once we had I guess you would call them large landowners, and then like fiefdoms and things like that, where people would sort of be part of um, like the lord, right? The lord would have like the castle, and then the people would work the land. Then as society progressed, when we started to have cities, um, now we started to really control freedom and things like that. We would have slavery in the ancient world quite a bit, right? Where people would be captured by another society, and then they would be enslaved. Things like in ancient Rome, there were people that were enslaved there, but even the people that were citizens of Rome and were not enslaved uh, wouldn't necessarily have freedom. And it wasn't until like sort of the ideas of the Enlightenment. I know I keep saying sort of, I'm saying sort of constantly. The ideas of the Enlightenment that we started to express the concept of freedom. So I don't know if freedom is as intrinsic as math in terms of intrinsically powerful. I don't know. It doesn't feel like it is. Um, and I'm not sure if there are any other ideas that might even come close. I don't know, love. We talk about love as being right, like something intrinsic to society, the sort of nature of social bonds, right? Is what we call love, but it would be like bonds, right? You have a social bond, the protection of a mother to a child, or um, obviously, if when people fall in love, and people falling in love for since the dawn of humanity, I guess kind of. I'm not sure how much it's changed, but I know kind of how it works now. I would assume that's sort of evolutionary. So I don't know if in the human sciences we can have the same intrinsic value. I think that the extrinsic value is much more like involved, and therefore it matters much more. It doesn't matter, but like it's determined. The power of knowledge in the human sciences is determined much more by the way it's conveyed because it's more extrinsic and it's less intrinsic. Maybe that's one of the keys to this, right? Is that like in like the natural sciences and then in math, power is sort of knowledge is like intrinsically powerful. Whereas once we get into the human sciences and history and art, it becomes extrinsically powerful, much more, which would mean that its power is much more determined by the way it's conveyed.